Oh, someone's no one's gonna sit here.
Okay, all right, I'll let you, we still have another sheet
Is there some kind of we go up there as much of the summer as we can? Is there a play?
Oh, I'm from the Midwest, I'm from Chicago, I know. Boy, do I. Where the wheelchairs going? Oh, they ended it.
Kansas is number one.
Let's just see what.
You're the photographer.
Like, I should have read, like, you could, you need to, like,
It's a pipeline. It's a pipeline. Why you like it? Or you don't like it? It's actually
very good.
how inexpensive.
And then when she went back to the
How those senses are changed. This. There you go.
All right, now we're set.
We have, Nicole had an older dog, but they were doing so well. We had a little older dog, but younger than that one. So we went over and swapped dogs. So she has heart rate, it's more lively, and we have Shalimar.
All right, if you go ahead and grab your seats, we'll get started.
He's a skateboarder. So
I'm Cornell Clayton. I'm the director of the Foley Institute, and on behalf of the Institute, I want to welcome you out to our event today. Even though all the doors were locked, I think, 15 minutes ago. But now they're open again, so that's good. A couple of announcements before I introduce today's guest. We have some upcoming events. Our next event is next week on March 10th. We have Ambassador Ryan Crocker coming to campus. Ambassador Crocker is probably has more experience in the Middle East than any single diplomat in the United States today. He was former ambassador to Afghanistan, former ambassador to Syria, former ambassador to Iraq, former ambassador to Lebanon. So he has tons of experience, and he's going to be talking, the title of his remarks is The Middle East Meltdown. That's from 4:30 to 6 p.m. on March 10th in the Cub Junior Ballroom. Then on March 26th, we have Nico Switek. Nico is EU fellow from Germany. He's visiting the Jackson School over in Seattle. He'll be coming out to speak about the future of the European Union. And I think in particular he's going to focus a lot on Germany's role, which has become very interesting right now, given their politics and Angela Merkel's, the fact that she won't be the next prime minister. And then finally on April, that's on Friday here in the Foley Institute at 12 noon. And then on April the 1st, we have David K. Johnston coming to speak. David K. Johnston is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author of many books. He covers financial news and the economy. He'll be talking here on April the 1st at noon in the Foley Institute. He'll be talking about the prosperity tax during that presentation. And then later in the afternoon at 4:30, he'll be speaking, and that's in the Spark building. He'll be speaking about the corporate tax and whether it's outlived its usefulness. So both those would be really excellent presentations. I encourage you to come to all of those. Today, however, we are fortunate to have with us Luis Cortes Romero. Luis is a founder and managing partner of the Washington office of the Immigrant Advocacy and Litigation Center, where he practices immigration law, including cases involving the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or the DACA program. Luis has represented clients in a wide variety of immigration-related cases, including high-profile constitutional litigation, as well as clients under government investigations. Luis is himself a DACA recipient, and he graduated with his law degree from the University of Idaho here in 2013. He was the co-counsel in the Supreme Court case challenging the DACA program just last fall. We're currently waiting for a decision in that case, which could come down any time now. And that's going to be the subject of his remarks today, is the DACA case. So join me now in welcoming Luis Cortes Romero.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. I will try to leave some time at the end for questions, so I'll try to move quickly, though I will stick around a little bit after if you guys have any questions. So today, what we're going to be focusing on principally is the DACA case and the Supreme Court and where it is now. But I think to get a full picture as to where we are now, we have to know where we started, how this whole thing came to be, and why does DACA mean so much for so many people. It's more than just protection against deportation. It's more just the ability to receive work authorization. DACA was a huge landmark in the immigrants' rights movement, and so we'll see how it all came to be. But we'll start at the beginning. We'll start at 2000 with the DREAM Act. In the year, 2001. In 2001, the DREAM Act was first introduced in the legislature. The idea was that certain individuals who came as young people, who came to the United States as young people, would be able to have a pathway towards lawful status. So it would be either legal permanent residency, what is often known as a green card, and eventually, down the road, many years later, U.S. citizenship. So when we hear these remarks of like, why don't you just apply for citizenship? This was supposed to be it. The DREAM Act has been introduced several times, and it hasn't gotten past Congress. It continues to be blocked time and again, and continues to be a subject of wide debate, which is a bit surprising because now we see that 80% of Americans are in support of the DACA program. That's across political aisles. And so we can't get 80% of people to agree on anything, right? So it's kind of surprising that we see so much support, yet so little to be done. But this is, the DREAM Act legislation also coined the term dreamer, right? When we talk about who are the dreamers. And it was coming from this legislation. Sorry, before we get there, just to look a little bit as to what the requirements were, is that they had to show, if you were going to qualify for the proposed DREAM Act, you had to show that you entered the United States before you were 16 years old, and that you had lived in the U.S. for continuously, at least for 5 years, that you had graduated from a high school, a U.S. high school, or obtained a GED in the U.S., that you were a person of, quote, good moral character. What does that mean? Well, I guess the feds will figure that out for you. You have to pass a rigorous criminal background check. I mean, we're talking about the Department of Homeland Security. If anybody's going to check your background, it's going to be them, and they're going to do it rigorously. And so what would happen is that you would get this thing called conditional residency status, then lawful permanent residency status, then eventually U.S. citizenship. So it was a long road, but at least there was a road somewhere. But unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. The frustration of it not happening and our fates being really stuck in the political branches unified a lot of dreamers, a lot of the undocumented youth, a lot of the undocumented students, and it created this profound activism. And in 2005, there was a group, now the largest immigrants' rights group in the U.S. called United We Dream. United We Dream was founded by undocumented students. It was founded by undocumented activists in the largest coalition to mobilize and to create political accountability. Now, this is amazing, even from a political science perspective. Think about this. You have a group of people who cannot vote. They cannot vote, yet they have a stronghold in the political outcome and the political conversation. That's amazing. to have politicians pay attention to people who won't vote for them. And so this is the first of its kind. United We Dream now is nationwide. They're a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that gets support by some of the biggest organizations, and it started in 2005 by young people, by activism. And so we're starting to see, and we're going to find out a little bit more about United We Dream and their activism. United We Dream has subsections and subgroups in each state. Washington State has a United We Dream chapter. And so if you're ever thinking about how to get involved as an ally or someone who wants to get involved in the immigrants' rights movement, United We Dream is definitely one way to get started. If you're pressed for time and you're really busy, feel free to donate to United We Dream. That's another way to provide some support. So we're starting to see this coalition of young people really start to come together and politically mobilize. Comes to 2012. Now, this is an important time for the immigrants' rights movement. President Obama had run on the promise to protect immigrants, though we know historically that President Obama's administration deported the most people in any administration ever. And so when it came time to re-election in 2012, he was held accountable. A lot of people were asking, where are these immigrant protections that you promised? Where is it? Because you said one thing, and the fact that our community is becoming fragmented really shows something else. So the same young people, activists, young students got together, and they started to hold President Obama's feet to the fire. They would host sit-ins in his Chicago office, his headquarters, and his rallies, and they would stay there to make sure that they were heard and that they were not forgotten about. I'll show a video here as to what that looked like. So we're starting to see now really this revival of the immigrants' rights movement after the DREAM Act. And we really started to see this new type of identity, undocumented and unafraid. Now, I remember going through my undergrad and being part of the immigrants' rights movement before this. So I remember being undocumented and like a little afraid about what was going to happen. I'm not going to lie. But being undocumented and unafraid meaning not only coming out and saying I'm undocumented and I'm afraid of saying so, but also that I'm unafraid of what the future holds, and I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to continue with my education. I'm going to continue pursuing my career. I'm not going to let the fear of the unknown of moving forward stop me from pursuing whatever academic or career dreams that I have. So when people say undocumented, unafraid, it's not just about coming out of the shadows and saying I'm undocumented. It also means I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not going to let that stop me from moving forward. And this is remarkable, right? We're seeing people put themselves out there and saying, I am undocumented. And by doing that, you're facing exile from a country, from the only country you call home, in order to say, I am one of the undocumented, part of the undocumented population. This is who I am, and I am one of you. And so it is protests like this during the Obama administration that led to ultimately one of the biggest wins in the immigrants' rights movement. This is June 15th, 2012. Good thing for you two. So we'll see when President Obama announced DACA and what that was about.
Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, Secretary Napolitano announced new actions my administration will take to amend our nation's immigration policy, make it more fair, more efficient, and more just, specifically for certain young people, sometimes called dreamers. Now, these are young people who study in our schools, play in our neighborhoods, friends with our kids, pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, their minds, in every single way but one, on paper. They were brought to this country by their parents, sometimes even as infants, and often have no idea that they're undocumented until they apply for a job, or a driver's license, or a college scholarship. Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you've done everything right your entire life. Studied hard, worked hard, maybe even graduated at the top of your class, only to suddenly face the threat of deportation to a country that you know nothing about, with a language that you may not even speak. That's what gave rise to the DREAM Act. It says that if your parents brought you here as a child, you've been here for 5 years, and you're willing to go to college or serve in our military, you can one day earn your citizenship. And I said time and time again to Congress, send me the DREAM Act, put it on my desk, and I will sign it right away. Now, both parties wrote this legislation. A year and a half ago, Democrats passed the DREAM Act in the House, but Republicans walked away from it. It got 55 votes in the Senate, but Republicans blocked it. The bill hasn't really changed. The need hasn't changed. It's still the right thing to do. The only thing that has changed, apparently, was the politics. As I said in my speech on the economy yesterday, it makes no sense to expel talented young people who, for all intents and purposes, are Americans, been raised as Americans, understand themselves to be part of this country. To expel these young people who want to staff our labs or start new businesses or defend our country simply because of the actions of their parents or because of the inaction of politicians. In the absence of any immigration action from Congress to fix our broken immigration system, what we try to do is focus our immigration enforcement resources in the right places. So we prioritize border security, putting more boots on the southern border than at any time in our history. Today there are fewer illegal crossings than at any time in the past 4 years. We use discretion about who can prosecute, focusing on criminals who endanger our communities rather than students who are earning their education. And today, deportation of criminals is up 80%. We've improved on that discretion carefully and thoughtfully. Well, today, we're improving it again. Effective immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is taking steps to lift the shadow of deportation from these young people. In the next few months, eligible individuals who do not present a risk to national security or public safety will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for work authorization. Let's be clear, this is not amnesty, this is not immunity, this is not a path to citizenship, it's not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus our resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people. It is the right thing to do.
So there's President Obama announcing the beginning of the DACA program, right? Saying it was the right thing to do. Now, this is a huge part for the immigrants' rights movement in many ways. First, it's one of the biggest wins that the immigrants' rights movement had. Because, and I've said this time and again, the DACA program is not a gift from Obama. The DACA program was a political concession from the Obama administration after they were held to account by activists, by activism. It was their concession from the promises that they made this entire time. And so it was a humongous win for the immigrants' rights movement. We saw that the protests, the sit-ins, the arrests, the civil disobedience worked. Now, make no mistake, it came at a cost. Many people who were part of this activism early on were arrested, some were deported in order for this to be advanced. So to win DACA meant a lot. But it also started to create a different narrative amongst the immigrants' rights movement. As we saw with President Obama, it kind of created this good immigrant versus bad immigrant mentality, right? We're gonna keep the good ones and leave the bad ones out. He called the criminal aliens or the criminal immigrants, right? What he doesn't say is that some of the people who were deported under his policies were non-violent offenses. Some of them were even just traffic offenses. And so it took as much in order to someone to qualify as a criminal immigrant to all of a sudden box you out. The second part of the narrative that's brought up, it opposed the dreamers against their parents, right? Why were we going to blame the young people for something their parents did, right? Where now the parents are to blame, according to what President Obama was saying. And so it started to fracture a lot of the discourse, and it started to kind of fracture the movement a little bit. But even though setbacks, it was a major win. 800,000 people applied for this program and were granted deferred action for childhood arrivals. Now, those are 800,000 beneficiaries, but we're talking about the people who benefited from the program and their friends, their families, their communities, their employers, their employees. We're talking about millions of people here who benefited from the program. It is an unqualified success. And it goes to show that if there is some sort of broader immigration reform, this is the test of what we can see happen. Billions pumped into our economy and the country flourishing. So DACA was a huge win for the immigrants' rights movement, though it did come back with some setbacks. Now, deferred action, this was thought about from the activists. So it was the activists who thought about deferred action, who thought about it as a concept and presented it to Secretary Janet Napolitano, known as the Napolitano memo or the DACA memo, and also presented it to President Obama. Now, it's important to know that the first person who received deferred action, in this case, it was deferred action for childhood arrivals, but goes way back, decades back, to John Lennon. And so we'll see a little bit about John Lennon's story and how he was the first person, the first undocumented immigrant who received deferred action.
Deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, protects young people from deportation, and it's allowed close to 800,000 immigrants to stay in America since Obama.
Do we know if this is the loudest that it goes? Probably.
Probably.
Okay, that's okay.
You put on the bottom down there. There's a speaker. No.
Oh.
Down there.
Oh, it is. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Well, we'll just pay close attention.
Obama put it in place 5 years ago, but the legal groundwork for DACA goes back much farther. DACA's origins date back to the 1970s, when one lawyer and his rock star client discovered a basis for the policy in a practice known as prosecutorial discretion.
My name is Shumin Shir, and I am a senior staff attorney with the National Immigration Law Center. Under immigration law, it's been a well-established principle that the federal government has the authority to decide who can and cannot remain in the U.S. The first known case of an individual receiving prosecutorial discretion and therefore being allowed to remain in the U.S. is the case of John Lennon.
I met Alan Klein, the manager of the Beatles at the time. I remember appearing at their office, many gold records reflecting on all the walls. I realized at once I was kind of in unfamiliar territory. I was not big on pop music. The first person I met was Yoko Ono. I was very much impressed with her. She started to tell us about why she was in the United States. Then John stepped into the room. He said, "Leon, you're the immigration expert." I said, "I try." A conviction record. And I said, "What is cannabis resin? Is that marijuana?" Oh, he said, "No, that's much better than marijuana." We wouldn't be able to free ourselves of that conviction. So it was a very serious situation. When I got home, my wife said to me, "Your office called and said that you have a meeting with some heavyweight potential clients." He said, "Who were they?" I said, "Jack Lemmon and Yoko Ono." So we're talking about John Lennon and Yoko Ono. I said, "Yeah, that's correct." I had to get a 6-month extension. Would not be a problem. I went to see the top man, the district director of immigration for the whole port of New York. Next morning, I get a call from him. He says, "Because it's you, I'll give you a month, but get them out." Eventually, I determined that the way to do it was the Freedom of Information Act, which is a statute I love, to get proof that there was some authority to allow people here out of hardship. And I was served with a box of documents, copies of 1,843 cases where the government had no excuse other than to act under what we called non-priority. It meant you were putting it at the bottom of the list and you'd never go back to it. And it started a whole review of cases where the government has since extended themselves and allowed, out of the goodness of their hearts, people to remain here. The DACA program is really a tribute to John.
So there we started seeing where the DACA program really came, and it all really comes full circle, right? Because John Lennon has a very popular song about dreamers and dreams, and so it really kind of comes around all the way. But broader than that, we start seeing that DACA really was again coming from activism. They found this case about John Lennon and said, why can't we do that but en masse? If we could do it for one person, we could set up criteria for people to apply for this program in a non-priority status. So the requirements for DACA, once it eventually was in place, and these are going to start to sound familiar. You have to come to the United States before you were 16 years old. You have to have lived in the United States since June 15th, 2007. That's 5 years. You have to have been under the age of 31 at the time that the program was announced. You have to be obviously physically present. You have to be in the U.S. on June 15th, 2012. You have to have completed a GED or high school here in the United States, or been honorably discharged from the armed forces, or currently enrolled in school. And you have to have been not convicted of a felony or any serious offense. So it's starting to sound really close to the DREAM Act. But this was the requirements to apply for DACA. And again, what it would do, it's not going to give you a pathway anywhere. It'll put you at the bottom of the list, and presumably they won't get back to you, and they will allow you to be here. And this is a deal between the government and the applicant. I'll give you all of my information, where I've lived, where I've worked, all my biographical information. You have to go into the USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Office, where ICE is. And you have to give them your fingerprints, you have to give them your photo, and then they'll do a rigorous background check, and after all of that, they'll allow you to stay. So the deal is that so long as you play by the rules, these rules, then they will allow you to stay, you can continue living in the program. Thousands of people applied, and many, many people started getting their work authorization. They get a card that says work authorization, and it's valid for 2 years. And in 2 years, you have to renew, or you have to provide your information. Again, they take your fingerprints. Again, they take your photograph. Again, they'll pass a rigorous background check from the Department of Homeland Security. And then that is cross-referenced with the FBI and all of the databases in the world. And then once that is passed, you'll get your work permit again for another 2 years, and on you go. And so this program was ongoing, and again, thousands of people were becoming now eligible to apply. One of the other important parts of the DACA program that I'll talk about only briefly is this component called the advanced parole part of the program. Advanced parole allowed DACA recipients to temporarily travel outside the United States with the ability to come back. It allowed tons of DACA recipients to be able to study abroad, to visit family members, and to take trips professionally with the promise of them being able to return. And that was a huge part of the DACA program. It allowed the DACA beneficiaries to more fully participate in their schools. See if this one works.
I continue.
So in 2014, President Obama, after seeing what an unqualified success DACA was going to expand DACA so that more people can apply. And more so, it was going to expand this program to certain parents of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents. Legal permanent residents being green card holders, under this program called DACA. And so it was going to have an extended DACA, and now this new program, DACA, that will protect the parents of certain U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents in the same way that DACA did.
To believe that the best way to solve this problem is by working together to pass that kind of common sense law. But until that happens, there are actions I have the legal authority to take as president. The same kinds of actions taken by Democratic and Republican presidents before me that will help make our immigration system more fair and more just. Tonight, I'm announcing those actions. First, we'll build on our progress at the border with additional resources for our law enforcement personnel so that they can stem the flow of illegal crossings and speed the return of those who do cross over. Second, I'll make it easier and faster for high-skilled immigrants, graduates, and entrepreneurs to stay and contribute to our economy, as so many business leaders have proposed. Third, we'll take steps to deal responsibly with the millions of undocumented immigrants who already live in our country. I want to say more about this third issue because it generates the most passion and controversy. Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. That's why over the past 6 years, deportations of criminals are up 80%. And that's why we're going to keep focusing enforcement resources on actual threats to our security. Felons, not families. Criminals, not children. Gang members, not a mom who's working hard to provide for her kids. We'll prioritize, just like law enforcement does every day. But even as we focus on deporting criminals, the fact is millions of immigrants in every state, and every race and nationality still live here illegally. And let's be honest, tracking down, rounding up, and deporting millions of people isn't realistic. Anyone who suggests otherwise isn't being straight with you. It's also not who we are as Americans. After all, most of these immigrants have been here a long time. They work hard, often in tough, low-paying jobs. They support their families. They worship at our churches. Many of their kids are American-born or spent most of their lives here. And their hopes, dreams, and patriotism are just like ours. As my predecessor, President Bush, once put it, they are a part of American life.
And with that, he announced the extension of DACA and DAPA that was supposed to protect and prioritize some of the...
I continue to believe that the best...
Okay. So after President Trump announced the expansion of DACA and the new program DAPA, it quickly was challenged in the courts. The state of Texas, along with several other states, challenged DAPA in a Texas court, saying that the program was unlawful. The Texas court agreed, said that the program was likely unlawful, though it did not make a determinative decision, said it was likely unlawful, and it stopped the program in the meantime. It was immediately appealed to the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit agreed, said it was likely unlawful, again, without reaching the merits of the case, and stopped the program while they figured it out, and it immediately went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then was divided on the issue. At that time, Justice Scalia, who's one of the conservative justices, had just passed away. So there wasn't 9 people in the court, there was only 8 people in the court. And because there was 8 people in the court, there was 4 and 4 division. 4 thought one way, 4 thought the other way. And because it was divided, the Fifth Circuit ruling stood and said that the program is likely unlawful, and therefore we're gonna stop the program right now until we figure out all of its components. Eventually, during the course of the litigation, there was a change in administration and President Trump was elected president. And in as much, they stopped the litigation. They said, we're not going to defend this program anymore. And so once President Trump became president and he wasn't going to pursue DAPA or the extended DACA, there was a lot of people who were nervous about what that meant for all the DACA recipients. And this is going to be very important, because this is some like behind the scenes stuff that we didn't see until way, way later. President Trump ran on a platform saying that he, on a kind of hardline immigration platform, right? We all heard the stuff that he said in his campaign rallies and on his way to be president. Once he was elected president, that tune changed dramatically, particularly when it came down to Dreamers. He said that Dreamers were a very delicate topic for him. He said that we got to treat DACA recipients with heart, and that it was a very difficult subject for him to touch. Now, that's not the platform he ran in. He ran in a completely different platform. And so this switch in attitude, all of a sudden, and it seemed too that he didn't consult with any of his administrators or his cabinet when he made this switch. And so he was, as we've seen him do, he will kind of just start talking to the press and kind of says what he's feeling at the time. And that's what he's been feeling, is that he does not want to end the DACA program, though that's not the platform he ran on. And so all of a sudden, this change made a lot of people nervous. It made the Republican immigration hardliners nervous as about whether the DACA program was going to end or not, because they wanted it to end. But it also made a lot of DACA recipients nervous, because he ran on one thing, but now he's saying that, he's going to treat DACA recipients with heart. So do we renew? Do we not renew? I don't know if I want to get my fingerprints again. So there's a lot going on and a lot of uncertainty. In February 2017, is when President Trump was inaugurated, and when we start seeing the first case ever in the United States of a dreamer who was detained. His name is Daniel Ramirez Medina. Daniel is a Washington State resident. He was living in Federal Way when he was detained collaterally. ICE was going after, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, it's the Immigration Police. They were going after someone completely different, and they caught up Daniel on the way. So we'll talk a little bit more about Daniel's case.
Here now in Fox News exclusive, Ethan Detmer, attorney for the Dreamer in ICE custody, Daniel Ramirez. Good to have you here tonight, Mr. Dreamer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So your understanding, according to, you just saw the statement that came in from ICE, and they say that he admitted being a gang member while in custody, and that also when they looked into his social media and his computer, it was clear that he had a connection in a number of ways to a criminal gang.
Well, I'll say a couple of things about that. First, as I think you know, and as the introduction said, in order to get DACA status, you have to give a lot of information, a lot of personal information to the government. You have to give your fingerprints to the government, and DHS runs a background check, and Daniel Ramirez went through that twice. In both times, the government DHS found after all that work, that he was not a threat to the public safety, that he was not a threat to national security. And the most recent such review was just less than a year ago, and nothing's changed since then. So they've looked at this twice already. The second thing I'll say is, we talked to the government just yesterday and asked them what evidence they had of his gang membership, and the government told us they didn't know what information they had. So all of this seems to be coming out now. We do look forward to seeing what they tell us tomorrow morning. We're supposed to get an explanation from them of why they're keeping him, and we'll respond to it as soon as we see what they have to say.
Yeah, and this statement was on background from a federal official in the department saying that he had admitted it. So as you point out, I mean, it needs to be determined what the actual case is. It's interesting that when they went into the house, they took the father, who they were originally there for, who was a felon who had been deported and returned, which is clearly under the category of this executive order. Now, the executive order says they want to remove repeat criminals, people who come back into the country, deported to come back in, and also members of gangs. That's in the group that is included in this order. They didn't take his brother. So, it's possible that they didn't take his brother because they didn't find the same information, or he didn't admit to being in a gang, and perhaps your client did.
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, from all the reports we've had, none of those questions were asked at the time of the arrest. What we understand happened at the time of the arrest was Daniel and his brother were at this apartment. They just happened to be there. There was no warrant for either of them. And Daniel said that he had a work authorization card, which is the card you get for having DACA status. And we can't explain, we don't know why it is that he took Daniel and why the ICE agents took Daniel and not his brother, because really they were in the same circumstance. They're both Mexican-American young men, they both had DACA status, neither one of them was the subject of this arrest warrant. And that kind of arbitrary treatment is exactly what the DACA promise was meant to avoid. I will say one more thing about this supposed admission to gang membership. Daniel Ramirez denies that completely, and in fact, what he has been very clear about was after he was taken to the processing station, the ICE agents pressured him to admit to that, but he wouldn't do it because it's not true.
Okay. Mr. Devlin, thank you very much for being here tonight and telling your client's side of the story to us.
So Daniel's case is a very tragic case, but it's also a cautionary tale. This is what happened. Daniel's dad was Daniel was living in California. Daniel's dad and Daniel's brother was living here in Washington. The minimum wage in Washington is higher than the minimum wage in California. Daniel had just had a son. And so he is moved up to Washington in order to live with his brother and get a higher paying job, because he now doesn't just need to support himself, he needs to support his son. Makes sense. One morning, ICE agents come and pick up his dad, and his dad says, I gotta go tell my kids, they're inside the apartment, I gotta tell them that you're taking me because they're gonna freak out if I just don't come home tonight. And so the ICE agents say, fine, go tell them. So the dad goes inside, and as the dad walks inside, the ICE agents follow him inside too. Daniel, who had just gotten there a few days prior, is sleeping on the couch. Daniel wakes up to ICE agents in his living room, and within 5 minutes of waking up, he's now in handcuffs by ICE. They don't ask him any questions. He keeps saying, I have DACA, and they take him all the way over to the ICE processing station. At the ICE processing station, they ask him where he's from. He said, how long he's been living in Washington. He said, I just got here. Okay, where were you living before? He was living in California. Now, they asked him where in California. And his mom is still in California, so he didn't want to give the exact city, because he was like, well, you just took me, I don't know if I'm going to be turning on the mom. So he provided, because he lives in a small town, he provided the closest major city that he's nearby, Fresno, California. And so he said, oh, Fresno, I come around the area of Fresno. Daniel has a nautical star tattoo on his arm. And they said, oh, well, you're coming from Fresno, I see a tattoo on your arm, that's a gang-related tattoo. Daniel says, no, it's not a gang-related tattoo. I actually got it on my 18th birthday, and I literally picked it out of a wall. Now, if you've ever been to California, everyone has a nautical star tattoo there. And so it's something you just see there. And he's like, no. And he goes, well, have you ever been in a gang? He said, no. He goes, okay, well, have any of your family members been in a gang? He said, no. Eventually, the net got so wide, they said, do you know anybody who's ever been in a gang ever? He said, well, someone in my high school, I think I had some gang members in my high school, I think. And he goes, so you're gang affiliated. And they took away his DACA, and they detained him at the Northwest Detention Center, which is one of the largest detention centers in the United States. And so we start seeing this, and I get a phone call from Daniel's brother on a Friday. Daniel's brother calls me in a panic, saying, they just took my brother. And I start going through the same routine questions saying, okay, well, does he have any criminal history? Was he in trouble? Did he get into a fight? Did something happen? There's no, I asked him, is he in a gang or something? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, this sounds really weird. I'm going to go see him today. It was a Friday afternoon. And I guess I was his 5th call, because he had called other people, other attorneys to try to go see him. And because it was Friday afternoon, he was told, I'll go on Monday. But I remember thinking, I know what that must feel like because I have DACA. And not only that, they accused him of being a gang member because of his tattoo. And I'm like, well, I have tattoos. So this could have very easily been me. And we know historically that brown identities have been criminalized for a long time in the United States. And so if I'm just wearing a regular shirt, maybe not a tie, maybe not a vest, and maybe I'm not being featured for some Supreme Court case, and I'm just walking down the street, someone very well may pin me as a gang member and take away my DACA too. And so I say, I'm on my way. Don't worry about it. Let's meet at my office at around 8 p.m. because I'm going to go visit him right now. I talked to Daniel. Daniel would be the worst gang member because when I talked to him, he was such a sensitive soul. He was very nervous to be there. He was very distraught. He was in tears. He's saying, I just want to see my son. I didn't do anything wrong. And they're actual, gang members there. He's like, they house me with gang members because they think I'm a gang member. And so now this is on Friday afternoon. And I go back and meet Tony, Daniel's brother, and frankly, I don't have a good answer for him. I said, I don't know what we're gonna do, but let me think about it and let me just get back to you tomorrow. And that's kind of the best answer I had. So that evening, I remember going home and I just put my face in my palms thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I really start feeling for Daniel because I also start seeing myself a lot in Daniel. And I also start thinking, this is the end of DACA. They're not going to announce it. It's going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts. They're going to end DACA one by one, accusing us of being gang members, accusing us of being threats to national security. This is it. This is it. And so, as lawyers do, they have listservs and things like that. So I put an email out saying, hey, is this the new normal? President Trump was just inaugurated. As you saw from the clip of Fox News, it had something about his first 100 days, so we know he's fresh into the office. And so, has anybody seen this and what's the get down? I don't hear anything. On Saturday, I talked to his mom. I talked to Daniel's mom. I asked the same questions. Is he a gang member? She laughed. She's like, Daniel, have you met him? No, he's not a gang member. And so I'm like, okay. Then I get a phone call from a gentleman named Mark Rosenbaum. Mark Rosenbaum was at the ACLU for 40 years, and he had just recently assumed the director of this nonprofit called the co-counsel, one of the largest pro bono firms in Los Angeles. He calls me and says, I heard about Daniel's case. I want to talk to you a little bit about it. And so I didn't have a whole lot of information still at that time. I explained a little that I know, and he's like, this is weird. Well, and I tell him, I'm going to go back and see Daniel tonight. I'll tell you when I have more information. He's like, all right, let's talk tomorrow. I'm like, cool. I talked to Daniel. I'm not really getting much more information than what I already have. And I just figure, okay, well, I need to figure something out. Now it's Sunday. And my car has been really bad. My car had a bunch of problems. So that's the Sunday that I dedicated to fix my car. Particularly because there was problems with the power steering. And so I get a phone call from Mark. He's like, hey, it's Mark. And by the way, I'm here in Seattle. I just flew up from Los Angeles. Can you come pick me up? I'm like, what the hell? Okay. So I have to Google what he looks like to make sure that I pick him up correctly. I pick him up and I'm straining my arms because my power steering isn't working. So I'm just like, ugh. And I get to the airport in the SeaTac, the Seattle Tacoma airport. I pick him up, gets in the car. I'm like, hey, well, now what? He said, do you mind if we go visit Daniel? I'm like, well, I guess we're here already, right? And so we go down to Tacoma, we visit Daniel. He asks a lot of the same questions. And now we're leaving the detention center, we're going back to my car. And the only question he asks me, Mark, is, do you believe him? And I said, yeah, I believe him. I believe he did nothing wrong. And I believe they accused him of being a gang member. And to me, he looks sincere. He's like, okay. We get back in the car, and I don't know what we're doing. And he's like, do you mind if we go to your office? Again, I'm like, I guess. My dad was supposed to fix my car, but now I'm here. So, okay. And so as we're making our way back to my office, he gets on the phone, Mark does, and he says, hey, we just met with him. We're going back to his office. We'll meet you there. I'm like, we'll meet you there? Who are we meeting? What are we doing? And so we get back to my office, and that's where I meet Ethan Detmer. Ethan, who was on the interview just now. And he's there. And he said, hey, my name is Ethan. I am part of this law firm, this corporate law firm in San Francisco, but I heard about this case and I want to help. And so Ethan's law firm typically is the one who would represent someone like Facebook or Twitter on contract disputes. But Ethan was very impassioned about what he heard, and he flew out that same day to come meet with us. And so we start just pouring our brains into paper and start thinking about theories. And after about 3.5 hours, we realize, I don't think there's anything we could do. I think ICE can just do this and get away with it. And so we're very bummed out, but I think that that's the hard reality. And so we're thinking, okay, well, if this was a weird few hours, I guess I'll see you guys later. I go back to my apartment, and again, I bury my hands into my palms thinking, I don't know what, I'm gonna have to tell Daniel tomorrow. And so as I'm getting ready for the next day, I get a phone call at 11 p.m. It's Mark, and he said, we figured it out. We think we have it. We think we have a working theory that we can be able to challenge taking away DACA. Because you can't just take away DACA like that. You have to have a reason, you have to have a process, and blah, 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 blah. Long story short, we need to file a complaint in federal court right away. And we should do it by tomorrow, 8 a.m., so we gotta do it overnight. I laughed. I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Because I thought he was kidding. But he said, no, I'm serious. We need to work through the night, and we need to file first thing in the morning. And so that's what we did. Next thing I know, we were getting on board the dean of Berkeley Law School, Dean Erwin Chemerinsky. We have one of the professors from Harvard, Lawrence Tribe. We have another professor from UC Irvine. Now she's in Michigan, Leah Littman. And all of a sudden, we're starting to attract this powerhouse of brains, of people getting together and trying to rescind or challenge what they did to Daniel. Oh, and I thought I was gonna fix my car Sunday, by the way. And so next thing you know, I'm writing a brief overnight, just trying to stay awake. 8 a.m. comes and we're all exhausted. We're exhausted, but we get to file the lawsuit in federal court first thing Monday. This is, eventually Daniel gets released from custody, and this is us. You see myself here, Mark Rosenbaum, who used to be at public counsel. This is Daniel. This is Ethan Detmer, one of his other attorneys, and Daniel's brother, after our hearing in federal court. And so we became experts right away about what it means to take away DACA, when the government can and can't do it, and what kind of processes an individual is owed. And I mean, we had some of the best legal minds around it. And so that's how we all got together, and at least for Daniel's sake, started to challenge the government that they could not just take DACA away because they wanted to. But now come 2017, and this is what happens.
Trump is scrapping another Obama policy that protected many immigrant parents from deportation, but he has not yet decided the fate of the so-called Dreamers. Correspondent Kristen Fisher has more.
Hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children will be allowed to stay, at least for now. According to this fact sheet posted on the Department of Homeland Security's website last night, it says the memorandum that created the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, will remain in effect. The question is, for how long? The White House says President Trump still hasn't decided what to do about these so-called dreamers. On the campaign trail, he promised to deport them.
We will immediately terminate President Obama's 2 illegal executive amnesties.
The Trump administration officially terminated one of those amnesties last night, the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residents, which would have protected the parents of Dreamers from being deported. But it never took effect because it was blocked in federal court. Now, the fate of the poised program, DACA, is still in question, but the president's opinion of it is clearly evolving.
DACA is a very, very difficult subject for me. I will tell you. To me, it's one of the most difficult subjects I have.
Last week, the Homeland Security Secretary pleaded with Congress to pass a bill granting Dreamers some clarity.
I'm not going to let you off the hook. You've got to solve this problem.
But elsewhere, the Trump administration is cracking down. Over the weekend, more than 100 Iraqi immigrants in Detroit were arrested, including dozens of Christians. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement says most of them had committed crimes, but their families feared religious persecution and possibly death if deported back to Iraq.
How can you take my brothers of these families to Iraq? None of them speak the language, and they will kill the Christians. They will kill our people.
Now, this crackdown comes after Iraq agreed to a deal in exchange for being released.
So we're starting to see a little bit of the evolution of the policy, but then we see the full-blown ending of the program. And then I promise I'll make sure that we have a few minutes for questions at the end, even though we're running out of time. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. Well, eventually, they ended the program. Attorney General Jeff Sessions ended the program for everyone and ended the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Now, me, Ethan, Mark, and the whole team had already become experts as to how to defend DACA and what to do to challenge it in federal court. Once DACA was rescinded, what we saw was that the state of California and the UC regents, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, so on, they challenged the rescission of the program. But we knew that no one challenged on behalf of the actual DACA recipients. That's a much different claim, and that's a much different story. Yes, we know that the states are going to suffer a lot if DACA is ended, but the people are going to suffer a lot if DACA is ended. So, because we already had the team assembled, we got 6 DACA recipients to be able to show that they will suffer harm if their DACA is rescinded. We had a doctor from Harvard, a lawyer, a community organizer, a special ed teacher, a psychiatrist, and a elementary school teacher, 3rd grade, all got together and they became our plaintiffs, the brave faces of the DACA program. And we filed suit in federal court 3 days after the states did. We filed suit, I think, by Thursday. On that Monday, we were summoned to federal court in San Francisco, and we had to go there to challenge it. So we start seeing there, these are our papers that we filed for a complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief, meaning we want the program to stay in place. And we start to see the team again. Professor Tribe, Dean Chemerinsky, Professor Leah Littman, myself, and Mark Rosenbaum, and Ethan Detmer, along with a few other attorneys. And so it grew and drew controversy and protest from all over the nation. Individuals were protesting the rescission of DACA and wanting the program to stay in place. I want to play 1 minute of this before we move forward.
By the acting secretary, conferred in the Department of Homeland Security. And so this is a lawful.
There's an interest that said that if we, first of all, by the government as this after a law,
which I think is very important, Your Honors. The government has not said one word.
Mark Rosenbaum on behalf of the individual.
That's Mark.
Plaintiff. Judge Owens, I do intend to get to your equal protection arguments. If I can, with your indulgence, I'd like to spend the bulk of my time on the substantive due process issue. The government, in its presentation to you this afternoon, said not a single word with respect to the individual recipients, the current recipients, whose lives will be irreparably injured if in fact the rescission takes place, so as to cut them off from continuing opportunity to renew their status of DACA. The recipients in this case, Your Honor, a doctor, a lawyer, a clinical psychologist, a middle school teacher, a special ed teacher, and a law student and community organizer are building meaningful, productive lives of service to our most disadvantaged and underserved communities as consequence of the fact that the DACA program created core liberty interest to remain in this country, interest to build lives, to pursue one's dreams, interest of dignity in terms of coming out and no longer being invisible, that were in fact enabled precisely the interest of the government in setting up the DACA program in the first place. If in fact these interests are stripped, as well as the interest of hundreds of thousands of other dreamers who also came to this country as children, if they are stripped, it denies due process in 2 ways. First, substantively, and second,
you can find the rest of the argument on YouTube, but it's amazing. And Mark Rosenbaum, again, being at the ACLU for 40 years, knows how to craft a story, but to be able to carry the legal theme of it as well. He's an amazing, amazing lawyer. Makes me forgive him for ruining that Sunday. So that is in 2017, 2018. Quickly wrapping up, we're now in 2019, 2020, where Ted Olson, who is a historic Republican, he was the Solicitor General under George W. Bush, had worked for Office of the Legal Counsel previously, and is known to be a pretty hardcore Republican. But he calls us up and lets us know we want to join this DACA fight. Next thing we know, him and I are now then defending DACA at the Supreme Court, which is a bit of odd bedfellows, right? You get someone who's really Republican, like really, really Republican, and someone who like myself who does not identify with Republican ideologies in the least, and we will be working together to defend DACA at the Supreme Court. Someone tweeted a photo of us when we were working together, saying that, you know, kind of what an odd pairing it is, but it works. It works, and together we were going to be able to show, you know, that DACA was lawful and that the program should stay. But also, this team, I think, really to us projected the advocacy outside of the court. We saw that this transcends political lines. This isn't just about Republican, and this isn't just about Democrat, liberal, conservative. We see that this issue is an American issue that transcends the American public, and that it's, again, how Obama said it, the right thing to do. And so we knew that us teaming up together wasn't just going to tell the conservative and liberal justices at the Supreme Court that this is an issue that matters, but it was going to tell Congress that, and it was going to tell the American people that. So for interest of time, I'll summarize and conclude. Right now, we had Supreme Court arguments on November 12th of last year, and the justices heard the arguments. It's hard to say which way it's going to come out, but right now we're just waiting to hear, and we could hear anytime between now and June, essentially. And so we're all waiting, but if the DACA program is going to allow to move forward, then it'll be restored in its entirety until, you know, President Trump, if they want to rescind it, they're going to have to go through this entire process to do so, and can't just do so willy-nilly. If the program does end, then at least our suspicion right now is that for individuals who have it, they will continue to have it for the 2 years that they'll have it. So if you have DACA, our recommendation strongly is to renew now to get 2 years out of it. In case DACA ends, you still have the other 2 years. I'm sorry to keep you a little bit over time, and I'm happy to stay afterwards for questions. Thank you.